Let's start off. Let's start off unapologetic.
Guys, we've been getting it wrong this entire time. Epstein wasn't ever working for Israel. Instead, he was working for the Russian and Chinese intelligence agencies. According to former CIA officer Mike Baker, it was China and Russia Epstein may have been working for, not the US and Israel. Okay, hold on. Let me think about that. That might make some sense because look at all these photos of Epstein with these Chinese and Russian officials. Oh, damn, that's right. They don't exist. Not only does Epstein not have a photo with Xi Jinping, that man ain't even got a photo with Jackie Chan or Danny Yin. Hey, that doesn't mean anything. Just because he doesn't have any photos with Chinese and Russian officials doesn't exempt him from the weird financial dealings with Chinese and Russian banks like JP Morgan and Chase and Dutch Bank and Bank of New York Mellon and Bank of America. Well, if Epstein wasn't working for Russian and Chinese intelligence, why did he have esteemed residencies in cities like Manhattan and Palm Beach, Florida? Yeah, now that I think about it, given that Mike Baker is a retired CIA agent, I'm starting to think that maybe he was working on his comedy routine in pursuit of his new career, because ain't no motherfucking way you gonna try to convince us that Epstein just so happened to conveniently be working for the US's two greatest adversaries. What? Because I'll tell you who Epstein does have pictures with. Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Elon Musk, and some of the most powerful political elites who have ever lived. So are you trying to convince us that at one point there have been presidents and people close to them who were unknowingly assets to the Chinese and Russian intelligence communities? Because that's what it sounds like to me. And are we just supposed to ignore the fact that Robert Maxwell, who was father of Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's handler, we're just supposed to ignore the fact that that man was an open asset for Israel? What, Ghislaine Maxwell just decided, I'm going to leave the family business and start learning Chinese instead?
No one's ever going to do that.
Mike, you're a funny dude. I don't know how the CIA worked out for you, but you got a promising career in comedy. And I'm sure Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin agree, because that right there was the joke of the year.
So, guys, it's all okay. Epstein was with Russia and China the whole time. Xi Jinping and Putin. How could you do this? But it's worse than that, because now you have, of course, you have Democrats making the big, bold statement. Some Democrats warn that Epstein is a distraction from Trump's unpopular bill. Oh, no, Democrats, really? So in Washington, Democratic leaders can't stop talking about releasing the Epstein files, the rare issue that's driven a wedge between Donald Trump and his MAGA base and been a nagging nuisance for GOP leaders for weeks. But while most Democrats think it's a win-win for the party to keep a divisive issue for Republicans at the forefront, not all agree. No, this isn't a divisive issue. This isn't a divisive issue. This isn't a divisive issue. What this is for everybody that's tuning in is that this is a sitting president, along with Bill Clinton and numerous other politicians, had a full-on open relationship, knew him well. They knew about the most prolific trafficker in international history. They knew about Epstein, okay? They were friends with him. Now, again, maybe people just didn't know what he did, but the stories from his victims, from the people that knew Epstein and Maxwell, especially the victims that survived Epstein and Maxwell, they told some horror stories. One of the victims in particular, you can look at all their stories. Some of the victims have even alleged that Maxwell was far worse than Epstein. I dread to think, or even imagine what these women went through, the victims of Epstein and Maxwell. But it's not a divisive issue, because I've been seeing people across the political spectrum saying release the files. Some Democrats say the Epstein saga is an unwelcome distraction that's diverting attention away from Trump's big, beautiful bill, which they warn will cause millions of Americans to lose health care and food assistance. It's already happening. Representative Bobby Scott of Virginia, the top Democrat of the Education Workforce Committee, went so far to suggest Republicans deliberately drummed up the Epstein issue just as Congress departs for a long summer recess to avoid dealing back home with the political fallout from Trump's unpopular law. Republicans took away people's health care, took away their nutrition benefits, to cut taxes for the wealthy, and ran up a $3 trillion in debt. And so they're getting people to talk about Epstein so that people won't find out. Any discussion about Epstein diverts attention from what we ought to be talking about. No, we ought to be talking about Epstein. We need to be talking about this. This isn't a divisive issue. You could do both. Most Democrats egg on Epstein feud. The majority of congressional Democrats are relishing the Epstein moment. Oh, now they are. Now they are. The Epstein moment. That's what they call it. Hold on. Here's Chucky Boy Schumer giving in his 2 cents.
Today, I'm calling on the FBI to immediately conduct a counterintelligence threat assessment to ensure we understand the risk posed if a foreign adversary were to gain access to anything connected to the Epstein files. Specifically, I'm calling on the FBI to do 3 things. First, we must determine if foreign intelligence agencies could gain access to the information the president does not want to release in the Epstein files through methods that include cyber intrusion. Second, the FBI must identify any vulnerabilities that could be exploited by foreign intelligence agencies with access to non-public information in the Epstein files, including being able to gain leverage over Donald Trump, his family, or other senior government officials. And third, I'm calling on the FBI to publicly show they're developing mitigation strategies to counter these threats and safeguard our national security. The idea of foreign adversaries hacking into agency files to collect information that could be leveraged against our government is not at all a remote possibility. Just last Thursday, it was reported that DHS and HHS were among several government agencies hacked as part of a breach to Microsoft's SharePoint service. This hack, Microsoft confirmed, was carried out by Chinese actors. Hacks like this could very well be an attempt to exploit federal systems to get access to Epstein files and potentially use it to influence those names in the files.
Oh my goodness. I hope you heard that right. I hope you heard that. Let's rewind it again.
Against our government is not at all a remote possibility. Just last Thursday, it was reported that DHS and HHS were among several government agencies hacked as part of a breach to Microsoft's SharePoint service. This hack, Microsoft confirmed, was carried out by Chinese actors. Hacks like this could very well be an attempt to exploit federal systems to get access to Epstein files and potentially use it to influence those names in the files, those named in the files. Whatever is in the Epstein files is concerning enough. Donald Trump's running scared. If that is in fact the case, our adversaries could certainly be interested in trying to use this information to hurt America and Americans.
So, what do you think he's going to go with this?
We must ensure that that can never happen. The FBI must, and that the FBI must immediately conduct a risk assessment, so we're not caught flat-footed if our adversaries have already seen these files. National security, Mr. President, should never be a partisan issue. We need to do everything we can to make sure we're protecting the U.S. and American families every single day. This report is imperative to do just that. And there is one more thing Donald Trump could do to quell people's anger, confusion, frustration, and fears over the national security ramifications. Stop running away from this issue, tell the truth, and if there's clearly no national security risk, release the Epstein files, President Trump.
Oh yeah, but so to quote Mastermind Owl right here, one of our viewers, excuse me. So the Chinese are in danger of using Israel's blackmail material? Oh my goodness, or Russia? By the way, I do want to pull up another video here because Trump also decides to share about why they had a falling out just a little bit. Maybe why Epstein was kicked out of Mar-a-Lago.
Mr. President, Epstein has a certain reputation of
So the volume's low on this. Hopefully, the volume with Trump is a little bit higher for you guys to hear, but the report is asking about Epstein's reputation.
Mr. President, Epstein has a certain reputation, obviously. Just curious, were some of the workers that were taken from you, were some of them young women?
Were some of them young women? Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken, and it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad, but that story's been pretty well out there, and the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were young.
Yeah.
What did they do?
In the spa.
In the spa.
Yeah, people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world at Mar-a-Lago, and people were taken out of the spa, hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told them, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine. And then not too long after that, he did it again. And I said, out of here.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa.
Virginia Jeffrey, just so you guys know, was one of the victims. Just a little side note before we rewind that. Just so you guys know. She passed away April 25th, 2025. Self-deletion.
Persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
She had no complaints. Okay, well, good. I guess no complaints. They're going to try and bury the story. They're already trying to bring up many distractions. They're already talking about the big, beautiful bill, how it's a distraction. They're trying to bring up, God almighty. They're trying to bring up the fact that, this is all smoke and mirrors. I'm going to say that China and Russia are involved. And of course, yes, we got the whole thing with Nancy Pelosi and insider trading. There's always going to be another story, but they want to bury the story so badly. The FBI screwed up. All of the intelligence agencies screwed up. The politicians screwed up. The influencers on social media screwed up. And the only people that are left now wondering are the families of the victims who have passed away or the victims that are still living in fear. And yes, even journalists that are in hiding that perhaps went too far in deep. Okay? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that have talked about this story that had to leave the country. Out of the country. They're out. O-U-T, out. Because of the danger that they are in. You know, you always hear these stories about evil being confronted. Well, we have evil right before us. Evil in real time. I would expect more from our leaders, but at this point, I'm always being disappointed. So I can't really be angry anymore. I just only could continue to be disappointed and wondering, when are people going to say enough? When are people going to speak out? They're saying that he was a Russian Chinese spy. Trump talking about how he casually took women, Epstein, out of Mar-a-Lago. You have Democrats saying that this is a distraction. And before you even know it, before you even blink, they're gonna try and make you forget about Epstein. They're gonna try and make sure that you forget everything, and not question it at all. For decency and honor, we must remember and keep talking about this story, because people are going to say, well, why do you care? Why do you care? Because those victims, that could have been your sister, cousin, niece, daughter, granddaughter, mother, aunt. You don't know. That could have been somebody that belongs to you. To the men in the audience, that could have been those victims. What if that was somebody in your family? Everybody out there, to the men and women watching this show right now, those Epstein victims, they could have been your members of your family. How would you feel? Everyone across the political spectrum, you need to get furious. We're ruled over by sociopathic politicians. And how convenient now that the Democrats are so happy about the quote unquote Epstein moment. You heard me read it in that article. They view it as an Epstein moment. No, it's not an Epstein moment. This is about getting justice. Justice for the victims and us finally knowing who are the scumbags that partook in all of the abuse.